In this video, we'll be going over not only the passions by way of review, but also the process by which we analyze a particular situation to kind of tease out all of the various passions that may be at play. So, the first thing that we need to understand is that a passion is a desire of the sensual appetite, meaning it is not part of our spiritual nature, it is part of our physical nature. That's where the senses reside. And this is a sensual appetite to act or to not act. Our passions exist specifically to either drive us towards action or away from particular actions. And this is always with reference to good or evil. So, the sensible appetite, that is the material dimension of the human person, has a natural desire for realizing our good or our flourishing. This comes from the animal soul, that is the irrational part of our person. And this is also made manifest specifically in our sensory experience. As we understand that the human person is both body and soul, the emotions actually kind of become this connection point between the body and soul, the spiritual and the material. We feel specifically within our bodies our emotions, but at the same time, they have a kind of eerie reminiscence to being spiritual, being completely internal. So what you see here is a chart of the various passions. You can see on the top in the blue are the concupiscible passions, that is the passions that are listed by the simple apprehension of good or evil. And then on the bottom in the red are the irascible passions, and that is the same thing as the concupiscible, only with the added difficulty of conquering the evil or the difficulty of achieving the good. You can see further that the columns are divided by whether the object in view is good or evil. All right, so on the left is good, on the right is evil. So this information is critical. You do need to understand not only all of the passions, but you need to be able to categorize them. You need to know which passions are elicited by a good object, which passions are elicited by an evil object. You also need to be able to divide the passions into the concupiscible and the irascible passions. So do make sure that you study this chart well. This is something you need to know. So passions themselves are morally neutral. Just because we have a particular emotion does not mean we have either sinned or done something virtuous. Our passions are morally qualified by their engagement of reason and will. It's not until we actually use our intellect, use our will in the wake of an emotion or along with an emotion that the emotions themselves start to take on a moral quality. Perfection in the human person is for the passions to be governed by the reason and the will, not the other way around. Anytime we allow our reason and will to be governed by emotions, we actually degrade ourselves into a more animalistic mentality. Our passions are morally good if they do contribute to good actions, and our passions are morally bad if they contribute to bad actions. So now, the heart of this presentation is really being able to do a passion analysis. That is, I give you a situation where there's a perceived good or evil, or maybe even I give you a situation where it's not very clear, and so you have to kind of guess or make an educated assumption. This is going to be, in a sense, a flow chart. And in fact, in the Google Classroom post for this video, I've also given you the flow chart that is going to be kind of separated out in the next couple of slides. So at some point in time, you may want to switch over to looking at the flow chart that is a PDF document that I've attached. And a flow chart is very simple. You simply follow the process and answering the question based upon reading of the passage. And in fact, that's all an analysis is asking good questions. So the first thing is, you can see there in the green, the situation. I've given you your situation, you have your content. The first thing you need to do after that is identify what is the object that is being perceived, what is the thing that the person is perceiving or looking at, and does the person in the scenario see it as a good or an evil, right? So if it's an evil, the first basic emotion that person is going to have is hatred toward that object. So there's your first emotion. That's the base emotion for a perceived evil. So let's go with the example of an evil. The next question we then need to ask ourselves is that evil present or absent? If the evil is present, then we would have sorrow. If the evil is absent, then we would have aversion. So our answer to that question demonstrates to us a second emotion that would be present in the situation. So let's continue on with the example of a present evil. So we have a present evil, thus we have hatred, and we have sorrow. But let's ask one further question. This gets to the irascible passions. Is this evil a difficult evil, a challenging evil to overcome? And if the answer is no, then we're done. We have assessed all of the emotions for that particular perceived object of evil. But what if the answer is yes, it is a difficult evil to conquer? Well, then we would have one further emotion, that is anger. We would expect to see anger to lash out at this perceived injustice. So then we would have three emotions that we've elicited from this particular situation. Let's go back a little bit and work with the example of an absent evil. So we have an absent evil, and thus we would have the emotion of aversion. So hatred, which leads to aversion when the evil is absent. But let's ask that one further question of, is it difficult to conquer? And if the answer is no, then we're done. We've elicited all the emotions pertaining to that particular object. But if the answer is yes, we would need to ask one final question, that is it possible to conquer this evil as it approaches? And if the answer is no, we would have fear. So then we would have hatred, aversion, and fear. But if the evil is conquerable, then instead of fear, we would have daring. And then the three emotions that we would have in this particular situation would be hatred, aversion, and daring. So you can see how these emotions layer upon one another. You can only have daring if you also have aversion, that is the desire to avoid this evil. And you can only have aversion if you hate the evil in the first place. Now let's go all the way back, and let's say the perceived object is good, right? So the first thing we would have is love. We have love for this particular object. So then we ask ourselves, is this object present or absent? If it's present, then we have pleasure. And then that is the end of the analysis for that particular object. Because once we possess the object, once we possess the beloved, we enjoy the object. But what if the object is absent? All right, so then we have desire. Love is the basic relationship towards that good, but since that good is absent, we desire it. But then we have to ask ourselves one more question, and that is it difficult to achieve? If it is not difficult to achieve, then we're done. We simply have love, which is layered with desire. But if it is difficult, then we have to ask ourselves one further question: is it possible to achieve? Can we possibly attain this good? And if the answer is no, then we have despair. We love the object, we desire the object, but if it's not possible to achieve, it's too difficult, then we despair at the fact that we would never have the object. However, if it is possibly achieved, then we have hope. So then we would have love, desire, and hope. Use this flowchart analysis to help you go through the examples in your work, which you will have to do on future assessments, to be able to tease out all the various emotions that can be in play. Now, you must understand the use of this flowchart is for one particular perceived object at a time. There may be multiple objects in a situation. And so then you would have to do this flowchart a couple of times